Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel and another video. In this video, I'm going to be restoring this beautiful burled walnut vanity that I got off of Facebook Marketplace for free actually. The previous owners, they just wanted it to go to a really good home, and when they found out that I restored furniture, they were more than happy to give it to me for free. But this piece is going to take a lot of work. There are a ton of scratches on this piece. The finish is basically failing all over the place. And this hardware was actually screwed directly into the drawer face itself. It doesn't use the actual holes that were there for the hardware. So I'm anticipating a decent amount of damage that was done to the drawer faces. Now, just taking a look at the back of this piece, you can see that there are actually three sections. You could see the two towers that are connected by a center section. And if I wanted to, I could take this piece apart and make two nightstands out of it, but I don't want to do that. I want to keep this piece original because I think it's just a gorgeous piece the way it is. Now, I didn't find any maker's mark on this piece, but I did do some research and I found very similar pieces that were dating back to the 1920s and 30s. So this piece has the potential to possibly be an antique. And you can see it even has its original wooden casters, which I'm so happy about. So I'm going to be refinishing this piece inside and out, top to bottom. So grab your favorite snack, grab a drink, and let's get into it. So just like any other furniture project, I'm going to begin by removing this hardware. And this hardware, the top is just an ordinary knob, and the bottom is, like I said in the beginning, screwed into the drawer face. So I'm just going to carefully remove that. And I'm not really sure why whoever put this hardware on put it on the way they did. Maybe they just like the style of it, and that's totally fine, but it did do some damage, as you can see here, but no worries, I could fix that. So what I'm doing here is I'm just checking to see how this piece of glass was affixed to the piece, because I'm going to have to remove this piece of glass to refinish it. So all I'm doing is I'm taking a putty knife as a protective measure just so I don't gouge the wood, and a flathead screwdriver, and I'm just going to pry it up. And it did take a little while to get off because I had to be very careful while I was taking it off. But eventually I got it to the point where I could just remove it with my hand and no damage was done to the side of the piece. Now I'm just going to begin cleaning this piece, and I'm using MCS cleaner and degreaser, which is a pretty good degreaser. It really cuts through all those layers of grime, oils, and dirt. And I mean, I know technically I don't really have to clean this piece because I'm going to be using a chemical stripper and I'm just going to be removing the finish anyway, but it is pretty good practice to clean your pieces with a degreaser just to make sure that, you know, everything is off and you're basically working with a blank canvas, dirt and oil wise at least. So when it comes to removing the finish, I started with my paint scraper just because the finish was pretty flaky and weak, and it really did scrape off well. The only problem is that there are 4 different pieces of veneer on this top, and when it comes to scraping, it's very easy to catch one of those seams of veneer and just completely tear it off. And I've been using a scraper for a while now, and I am pretty comfortable with it, and I can tell usually if I'm going to catch the veneer. So all I'm doing is I'm just scraping up until the seam and then scraping the rest to minimize the chance of catching the seam and tearing it. And just like in my last video, I showed that when it comes to the edges, I like to go on about a 45-degree angle and very gently scrape the rest on the edge off. And this just minimizes the risk of gouging the veneer, which is pretty easy to do. So after I've got that all vacuumed up, I'm just going to switch to a chemical stripper to strip the second top. And I'm using a Clean Strip Premium Stripper, which is the stripper that I really prefer to use just because it really cuts through very fast and efficiently, and I usually only need one coat. And you don't need to use like saran wrap or garbage bags to cover up this stripper. And you can see in this shot right here, this is only about like 2 minutes maybe of after I put the stripper on, and you can see the finish is already starting to let go from the wood. So if you're doing this as a business or want to do this as a business, it really is important to have a pretty good stripper. So now I'm just using my metal putty knife to scrape up all the stripper residue. And a really good question that I got on one of my previous videos was, do you have to go with the grain when using a putty knife and stripper to remove a finish? And the rule of thumb obviously is to go with the grain, but there are certain occasions where you may have to go against the grain for whatever reason. And there are certain instances where I will go against the grain when using a putty knife to remove a finish. And if you do go against the grain, just be very, very careful because you can scratch the wood with a putty knife. So if you do have to go against the grain for whatever reason, just be very gentle and very cautious. So what I was doing while I was explaining that was just using a stiff nylon brush just to basically scrub the finish off of the trim work. And then I'm going to come in with some acetone on a shop towel and wipe up all the residue. And I use acetone to wipe up all the stripper residue because acetone has this way of dissolving the finish and makes it very easy to clean up. It also gets rid of any oils left behind that could interfere with the adhesion of a new finish. You do want to be careful with acetone though, because if you use it in large amounts, there is a risk of weakening glue joints because acetone basically dissolves the adhesive. So I just tend to work in small amounts, and if I do have to use a lot, I try to make sure that I'm not working with any glue joints in the way. And of course, you always want to wear a respirator when you're working with acetone or paint stripper because those fumes can be very harsh. So just make sure you're wearing a respirator, and also make sure you have good airflow in the space that you're working. You know, just good air circulation. Now, when it came time for me to strip these drawers, I had to be very careful because those screw holes from the hardware were kind of protruding up and my putty knife was getting caught on them. So I had to kind of weave in and out and just kind of avoid them as best as I could while I was taking off the finish. And you can see I'm just shoveling all the stripper gunk right into a paper towel. And someone actually had a great question, which was, what do I do with all this stripper gunk once I scrape it off? And all I do is I take the shop towels and I put them in an open air bin that I have outside of my shop, and I let them completely air dry. Once they're completely dry, it's safe to throw out in the regular garbage. But if you're not sure what to do with it, you can check with your local municipality or county hazardous waste program. They'll direct you and show you exactly what you need to do with all that gunk. Now you can see in this shot right here, as soon as my arm is out of the way, that the veneer seems to be a mirrored image of itself. And you can see all over this piece, the beautiful wood grain is a mirrored image, and this is called book matching. It kind of reminds me of like a butterfly's wings, like two symmetrical sides that are a mirrored image of each other. And book matching has been around for a very long time. It's been around since like ancient Egypt, ancient Greece. It was popular during the Renaissance, and it was used to, showcase the unique, beautiful patterns of the wood in a very striking way. This is really the reason why I didn't want to separate this piece into two nightstands and completely discard this middle section right here, because this middle section is absolutely gorgeous with the beautiful burled walnut and this beautiful arched middle section right here. I really can't wait to get this old finish off and get it prepared for the Odie's oil. I think Odie's oil is going to make this wood completely come to life and just look absolutely stunning. Alright, so after I've gotten all of the finish off, I'm going to come in with 180 grit sandpaper and I'm going to begin sanding. Now I'm hand sanding a lot of this piece, and that's because this piece is actually a waterfall style piece, and it's really easy to go through the veneer on those waterfall edges. So I want to make sure that I'm giving it a good sanding, but a very gentle, careful sanding. And I'm also sanding this piece by hand because I just wanted to show you guys that you don't really need a fancy surf prep sander or even an orbital sander. You can sand these pieces by hand if you remove the finish first, whether that be from scraping or a chemical stripper. I wouldn't recommend trying to hand sand through a finish because that would take forever. But as long as you remove the finish first, hand sanding really isn't that bad. It definitely is a workout, but it's not as bad as it sounds. I'm only going to be using my surf prep just for the sides of this piece because it's a large flat area and it makes this process go a lot faster. I'm also going to be using my surf prep for a little bit of the trim work with a foam pad attachment, and that's really just to make the whole process go a lot faster, but I absolutely could have just hand sanded this entire piece. So what I'm thinking for this piece is I'm thinking I'm going to be sanding to maybe 400 grit because with Odie's oil, the higher you sand, the more of a sheen you get. So I think 400 would be a nice satin sheen. But for all of the trim work now, I'm thinking I'm going to stain it very, very dark, like a very dark walnut brown, and then use a semi-gloss polyurethane on all of the trim work only. So basically, all of the burled walnut is going to be natural, and I'm just going to put Odie's oil on it. And all of the trim work is going to highlight the beautiful walnut with a very, very dark brown, shiny finish. And here I'm just showing you that you can, when you have very tight corners, all you got to do is take a piece of sandpaper, fold it in half, and you can get into some really tight spaces. The veneer on this piece is also very, very thin, so especially on these curved sections of veneer, it's really important to hand sand because my goal here was to preserve as much of this beautiful veneer as I could. And like I said before, I'm going to be going up to 400 grit to get a nice satin sheen on this piece. So I'm going to be starting at 180 grit, I'm going to 220, then 320, and then 400. So I'm going to be using this foam interface pad by Surf Prep just to make sanding this trim work a little bit faster and easier. And this foam pad is really great because it allows me to sand all of this trim work very fast and without losing the profile of these curves. Especially on this fluted section right here, I really don't want to flatten out these curves, so I'll sand what I can with my Surf Prep, and then I'm going to come in with a folded up piece of sandpaper and sand up the rest of the insides of those fluted details. And I'm going to be sanding to 180 grit on all of the trim because when I make my stain, I want my stain to be more on the opaque side, and I also want it to be very dark. So sanding to 180 grit is going to help me get that look because the higher you sand, the lighter a stain is going to appear. So I don't want my stain to be light at all. I want it to be more on the dark side. So I'm going to be sanding lower to 180. But if you're looking to get your stain looking more on the lighter side, I would suggest going to somewhere around 320. So there were a couple small pieces of veneer that were peeling up. So I just went into my glue syringe stash and picked out the smallest syringe I could find so I could fit it behind the veneer. And these glue syringes are actually pretty cheap on Amazon if anybody's looking to buy some. And as I'm sure you saw, it comes with a bunch of different sizes of vials and needles for pretty much any use you could think of. And if anybody's curious about how to clean your syringes, all I do is I just empty out whatever glue is left in them, and then I'll just use mineral spirits to flush them out a couple times. That really works great for me. So as you could see, this little strip of veneer was peeling up a little bit. So I just very simply stuck the needle right into the areas that were lifting and injected some glue. And it's really good to see a little bit of a glue squeeze out when you do this. And that just shows you that you have enough glue behind the veneer or in that joint or, whatever the case may be. And here I'm just switching to a little bit of a bigger size needle because that small needle was good, but not enough glue was coming out. So I just switched to a bigger one. Alright, so while I have that clamped up and drying, I'm just going to mix up a little mixture of oxalic acid, which is a wood bleach, and it comes in like a crystal powdered kind of a form, and you just mix them into hot water, and you apply it to the entire surface that your stain is on. Now I'm just using a chip brush, but you can also use a foam brush, you could use a paper towel or a rag. And after you apply it, you're going to let it completely dry until the next step, which is neutralizing, which I'll explain in a little while. But just remember that this is a wood bleach, so if you're working with a piece that has two different tops and you only have a stain on one of the tops, I would recommend bleaching both tops, because if you don't, you're going to have one top that's lighter than the other. Okay, so as that oxalic acid is drying, I'm just going to finish up sanding up all this trim work. And I'm just going to flip him on his side just so I can reach the base of this piece. And since I have this piece flipped on its side, I'm just going to clean up the bottom a little bit. Just going to give it a really good vacuum, and I'm going to just sand up a little, not a lot, but just give it a nice little bit of a refresh. This is something I like to do, and I know you're not even going to be able to see it once this piece is on its feet, but it's just something that makes me feel a little bit better, I guess. When I said I'm refinishing this piece top to bottom, I meant it. I'm also going to be sanding the inside framing of the carcass. So my oxalic acid is completely dry, and now comes the next step, which is neutralizing it. And to do that, I'm just using about 2 tablespoons of baking soda in about 8 ounces of hot water. Then I'm just going to saturate a shop towel full of the solution and apply it to the surface. And as soon as you apply it to the surface, you should see a fizzing reaction, and all that is just the oxalic acid basically reacting with the baking soda and becoming neutralized. It's really important to neutralize the oxalic acid because if you don't neutralize it and you put your top coat on, there's a high chance of the oxalic acid residue bleeding through the surface. For example, in the past, I used to just clean it up with water, the oxalic acid residue, and I would put my Odie's oil finish on, and I would get this really strange white film that would bleed through and continue to bleed through, and it would eventually stop, but basically what would happen is it would bleed through, I would wipe it up with a microfiber cloth, and then it would bleed through again. And this would happen a number of times, and eventually it would stop, but it was very frustrating. So just learn from my mistakes. So all I did here was I just rinsed down the two tops with the baking soda solution, and then right after that I just rinsed them down with regular water on a shop towel twice. And also, just another little tip, if you're working with veneer, you might not want to let the water or the baking soda solution sit on the veneer because there is a chance of the water messing it up. So as soon as you apply the water or the baking soda solution, dry it off right away. There were a couple spots that were missing veneer or had some chips in them, so I just came in with some wood filler and filled all those up. And when you're working with wood filler, you just want to remember to make it proud so that when you sand the wood filler down, it's flush with the veneer. And you might be wondering here why my wood filler is more brown than the other wood filler I just used, which is more like kind of white or cream colored. And that's because I should have used the walnut colored filler, which is this filler right here, but I completely blanked out and I completely just forgot to do that. But it's okay, it's totally fine. I'm just going to come in with some blend-all sticks and probably a couple graining markers, and I'm just going to camouflage it. Alright, so here I'm just going to start climbing up through my grits. And something I wanted to talk about when climbing up through your grits is, well, number one, you definitely want to climb up through your grits the right way. And number two is when you're climbing up to a higher grit, like 400 and above, you want to make sure that you're working with a very clean surface. Because what will happen is when you sand, little particles will come off of the sandpaper along with sanding dust, and all of this stuff, if you don't clean between your grits, will get trapped in your next grit up and basically will kind of scratch the surface. So yeah, just make sure that you're working with a very clean surface in between each grit, especially if you're going to a high grit. So now it's finally time to start staining. So I'm just going to tape off all of these sections that I don't want to get stain on. And I'm going to begin making my stain for this piece. So all I'm going to be using to make my stain is some Odie's Safer Solvent. And I'm using two different colored pigments. I'm using Buffalo Brown and Espresso, and I think this is going to give me a really nice, really dark kind of walnut color. And I don't remember the exact ratio that I used with the pigments. I was just kind of doing it by eye, but it was probably around half and half, if I had to guess. And then when I finally found basically the color I was looking for, I just added some Odie's Super Duper Everlasting Oil to complete the stain. And I know I use these stains quite a bit, but that's because with these stains, it's very easy to control the opacity. It's very easy to control what kind of color you're getting. So basically, it's just very easy to control. So that's why I like these stains. And just like any other stain, you're just going to wipe this on, wait about 5 to 10 minutes, and then you're going to wipe it off. So I just wanted to take a second and just thank you guys so much for watching this video. This really is a passion of mine, and it's so cool that I'm able to share this with all you guys. You guys really leave such beautiful and helpful comments. I do read them all, and they all really mean a lot to me. Not to get all mushy on you, but I just wanted to say thank you. And I know I haven't gotten back to all you guys in the comments because there's been a lot of comments. But this video forward, I promise I'll try to get to all of them. And also, if you can, in the comments section, just give me your feedback. Let me know if my videos are too long, if you'd like to see shorter videos. Basically, just let me know how I can improve these videos for you guys. And here's where things made a little bit of a turn, a pretty hard 180 for me at least. I let the Odie's oil stain sit for about 3 days just to make sure it was completely dry before I put on my top coat. And for my top coat, I decided to go with a water-based clear gloss polyurethane. I believe it was Varathane that I'm using. And with this particular one, it goes on looking milky, but it does dry completely clear. And everything seemed to be going pretty well, actually. It was going on very nicely. It wasn't resisting at all. I finished the first coat. I closed up my shop. I went inside, went to sleep, came back the next morning, early the next morning, and... Alright guys, so here's the situation. I'm planning, as you guys already know from the video, I'm planning on making the trim on this piece using a clear gloss polyurethane to give the trim a nice glossy finish. And when you're using polyurethane, you can't use it in high humidity. And me wanting to really get this video out as fast as I could, I made the mistake of applying the polyurethane while it was raining. And that was a really bad mistake. It was a mistake that I knew I shouldn't have made, but I still made it. So my finish came out pretty bad. It's kind of white and hazy, and it just isn't good. So now I have to strip off the entire finish on the trim, just the trim, and I have to resand, restain, and put a new finish on. So that's where I am right now. So basically what happened is, since I put the polyurethane on while it was raining, it was at 100% humidity. And what happens is the moisture that's in the air actually gets trapped in the polyurethane, and it becomes very hazy or cloudy when it dries. It is supposed to be very milky looking or cloudy when it first goes on while it's wet, but when it dries, it's supposed to be crystal clear. But that's not what happened. So now I have to strip off the new finish I just put on. I have to strip off, I have to resand, restain, and put a new finish on. And this is really a perfect example of why it's not a good idea to rush through your projects, because you're just going to create more work for yourself and most likely make mistakes. But it definitely was a good lesson to learn. So I'm going to be using this Minwax semi-gloss oil-based polyurethane instead of the water-based. And I'm using oil-based polyurethane just because oil-based tends to be a little bit more of a durable finish, and you only need about 2 to 3 coats, whereas water-based you probably need about 5 or 6 coats to get the same amount of protection. And you can use a foam brush to brush on polyurethane. I'm using a brush that is specifically made for the application of polyurethane. And I'm just looking for coverage here. I'm just trying to get it on in any way that I can at first, and then I'm going to smooth it out with the direction of the wood grain. And I'm using very gentle brush strokes because it minimizes the chance of getting bubbles in the finish. And after my first coat is dried, I'm going to come in with 320 grit sandpaper and just give it a very light scuff sanding. Wipe it down with a tack cloth and apply the subsequent coats. And now that all the trim work is done, I'm just going to work on the walnut. And for the walnut, I decided to go with Odie's oil, which is going to give it a nice natural looking finish and a very soft sheen, which I think is going to contrast very nicely with the semi-gloss trim. And as I'm putting the Odie's on here, you could see that beautiful burled walnut starting to come through. And this isn't the Odie's oil that's staining the walnut. This is the actual color of this walnut, which is just absolutely breathtaking. Now, for anybody who's wondering what this Odie's oil stuff is, it's basically a hard wax oil finish, a tung oil based hard wax oil finish. And all that means is that it goes on as an oil, but it cures basically as a hard wax. And while that Odie's oil is doing its thing, I'm just going to start sanding down these drawer boxes. Now, this is something that I probably would have done a little bit earlier on, but I got a little bit distracted with the whole situation with the having to redo the trim work and everything, so I'm just going to do that now. But yeah, it's not the order in which I would normally do things. Sanding down the drawer boxes is something that I really like to do because, especially if the drawers aren't in very good shape, which these aren't, it just refreshes the entire drawer box and makes it look fresh and new. And after I finished sanding up all the drawer boxes, which took about an hour and a half, it's time to buff off all the Odie's oil. And this is a very important step of using Odie's oil, because if you don't buff off all of the oil, and I mean every single last bit of residue of the oil, you're most likely not going to have a successful finish. I also stained the rim of the drawer boxes to match the trim. And as I was doing that, I actually noticed that there was a little tiny piece of veneer in the corner of this drawer over here that was kind of lifting a little bit. So I just took another glue syringe and I filled that up with glue, taped it up, and clamped it off camera. All right, we're almost there. Just a couple more steps left, and here I'm just going to do some color correction on these patches that I made with wood filler. And what I do is I usually start with lighter colors first, and I'll make layers. So I'll start here with a lighter color, seal that in with some Mohawk clear lacquer, and I'm using flat lacquer here just so it doesn't add more of a shine than the Odie's would normally have. And then I'll come in with my darker colors, and I'll just mix and match until I find just the right mixture. And when you're doing this, it's never really going to be perfect, but you can get it very close. Like you'll see after I put this last layer on right here, you can barely even tell that it's there. I decided to use Odie's wood butter on the two tops and that middle section on the top. And Odie's wood butter is very similar to the universal oil, but the only difference is that it has a higher wax content. And this little bit that I have on my Merkur Milan pad right here will easily be enough to do this one entire top. You get a lot of bang for your buck with this stuff. Now, this is going to give the tops a beautiful soft luster as well as some extra protection. It's also a lot easier to apply than the hard waxes, so that's one of the many reasons why I like this stuff a lot. And I'm just going to let this sit on there for about an hour, and then I'm going to come in and buff it off just like the regular Odie's oil. I'm using some WD-40 here just to clean up these wheels a little bit. Now, I don't want to take all the tarnish off. I want to keep a lot of this tarnish to make it look kind of antique-ish and go a little bit better with the hardware that I'm choosing. So I'm just using a 1500 grit Merkur Milan pad to get off all the loose rust and hopefully get close to the look that I'm kind of looking for. And after I dried them off, I'm just going to take a 220 grit and just give the outside of the wheels a good sanding just to expose some new fresh wood and clean them up a little bit. So I wasn't really crazy about the way that the back of this piece was looking. You could see over here, there used to be a mirror that attached to the back right here. and the mirror is long gone, so I'm just gonna figure something else out here to make it look a little bit better to the eye. So I have this piece of oak that I had in my shop, and I was thinking about maybe just cutting this down to size and making like a little backsplash out of it. Nothing crazy, nothing fancy, just something to fill that void. But I do have to cut out 2 notches just so it sits in properly. So I got my skill saw, I made a couple of marks just so I know where to cut, and then I came in with my Japanese saw just to finish up where the skill saw left off. I gave the entire thing a really good sanding with 180 grit, and then I started applying my stain. And I'm using the exact same stain that I used for the trim of the piece. And after letting the stain dry, I just came in with that same oil-based polyurethane. I put Howard feed and wax in all of the drawer boxes and inside and out. I was thinking about maybe using some shellac to seal these drawer boxes, but I think Howard feed and wax will be fine. It really does a great job in freshening up the drawer boxes and making them look nice and new. Howard feed and wax isn't exactly a sealant per se, but it's more of a conditioner or a polish. But where these are just drawer boxes, I think it'll be fine. So I found some hardware that I think would go really nice with this piece, but the holes that are on the drawer right now are not the right size, so I have to fill them up. And I'm using Quickwood wood epoxy, which is a 2-part epoxy, and all you do is you mix it together until it's one solid color, and I'm going to mix it into a little sausage and just stuff these holes. And I let the Quickwood sit for about 3 hours to dry, and came back with a razor blade and just trimmed up the excess. Then I just came in with a 400 grit piece of sandpaper and just tidied it up a little bit. Then I just took this hardware hole template and I just drilled my new holes. And then I just started working on the color correction on those old hardware holes that I filled up. And again, this isn't going to be perfect, and I know that, but I'm just doing the best that I can here. The whole point is just to try to camouflage it, I guess, as much as you can, just so it's not immediately obvious. And that's it. We finally made it to the end of the video. A couple things that I just wanted to mention. The glass that was showed in the beginning of the video, the one that had the crack in it, I'm in the process of getting a new piece cut, but in the meantime, I'm just going to, because I wanted to get this video out, I'm going to stage it with the broken piece of glass, but it's not really that bad. It's just one little corner that's chipped. I really wanted to stage it with the new piece of glass, obviously, but I didn't want to have to wait another 3 days to get this video out. The hardware that I chose, you're going to see that in the reveal, but let me know in the comments what you think. Should I change the hardware? Is the hardware a nice match for this piece? Let me know what you think. So just wanted to say thank you so much, guys, for watching another video. If you like this kind of content, consider subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing. I'm still relatively new on YouTube, so it's all very much appreciated. But anyway, let's take a look at what this piece used to look like. It was a pretty gorgeous piece just the way it was, but the hardware definitely needed replacing, and it honestly kind of had sort of a dull vibe to it. There were a ton of scratches and scuff marks. There were a couple stains, and it just had a very overall kind of used and worn out type of look. I really hope I did this piece justice. This is really a beautiful, gorgeous vanity, and I put a lot of work into it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the reveal, and I'll see you next time.